1 minute to go, according to me.
Hi everyone, I'm Jo Chan, and it's so nice to see you all here for those who's joining us live. So I'm friends with Donate for Refugees and a trustee of A.S.I.S.T. So today I am the guest interviewer on behalf of Donate for Refugees. And I have the great pleasure in chatting with my beloved colleague, Sandy Cross, and she's also the founder of the project in Chios, A.S.I.S.T. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Jo. Good to see you. Nice to hear
Yeah,
you
it's so
too.
good to see you. So thank you so much for joining us today. And, I also want to thank everyone who's on Facebook joining us live today. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them out in the comments, and there will be time at the end of the interview for me to put your questions to Sandy. So fire away. So let me give you a brief introduction. Sandy has been a long-term, really dedicated volunteer in the world of refugee support, and in particularly in Chios, and also in the world of providing asylum information and legal help. So Sandy, perhaps you could start just to give us a brief introduction about yourself and the organization A.S.I.S.T.
Well, I've been living on Chios now for 3.5 years. I started as a volunteer with the Chios Eastern Shore Response Team, which is now Open Armour. Then I worked as the person on the ground for Choose Humanity's Emergency Legal Aid project. And from that, with the help of some friends, Greek lawyers, we decided that information and legal aid up front was as important as the emergency legal aid work we were doing, which was actually all appeal work. So A.S.I.S.T, the Asylum Seekers Information Services team, came out of the ELA project, and we also did a pilot project with an Australian and American lawyer who gave us the basis of how to actually design things. So A.S.I.S.T has been operating now since, well, we've been operating a bit longer because it took time to train and develop the organisation, but we started full services in June 2019. So we provide information services and we provide legal aid. The information services are based on the procedure and the process so that people understand what they are facing and they know their rights and their obligations. And then the second part of our information sessions were in relation to their rights and their obligations for social services, the services available from NGOs, how to get healthcare cards, how to get tax numbers, a lot of detailed information which is not readily available because of the number of people in the camp and because the information services, there used to be 2 very good information services on the website, but I think the advantage of our service is that people can directly ask questions to us and it's a more personalised service, that's all.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit about the situation and the conditions. So I think most of us would really like to know, especially with you having been on the ground the whole time and throughout most of this year as well, can you give us an update of the current situation on what it's like in Chios Island, and maybe describe to us a little bit what awaits, those who have just arrived, hoping to seek international protection, and the conditions they're living in, and perhaps also, let's just go through that first.
Well, it's been quite a while since there have been any landings because the border with Turkey is closed. But the conditions in the camp are very difficult to describe because words don't really cover the actual conditions and the experience. People I can't give you the exact figures because the figures from various sources vary. But since last July, I would say there would have been a minimum of 5,000 people living in a camp that was built for 1,000 plus people. So accommodation is insufficient by a long way. Many people, probably half the population, are living in tents outside the camp in conditions where people have to walk a long way to go to the bathroom. If the bathrooms are functioning, they have to walk a long way to get water. They're cramped all together. You really have to go there because the photos on Facebook do not convey what it is really like. Living in two-man tents, one next to the other, people from different cultures, different languages, who can't really communicate always with each other. A lot of people together, there's problems, there's always going to be problems. But there's no good lighting, there's very poor hygiene, or the hygiene facilities are totally insufficient. If you go there, you see it and you smell it. There's something about it that is really indescribable. I don't visit it myself now because many of the people coming to the office describe what's happening and things. There's a lot of tension. It's a dangerous place. And there are so many people. The overcrowding is unimaginable.
Yeah, I think I share your sentiment from having visited, previously before when it's even less congested. So that seems to be from your figures. So that's almost at least around 5 times over capacity of the available kind of.
It has been 5 times over capacity since July last year because people, from July to March this year, people were arriving every week in their hundreds, literally. So, and of course there are transfers and there are people leaving. But I would say at its most, there would have been between 7,000 and 8,000. And on an average, there would have been 5,000 since last July.
So just to give the viewers a picture, there is kind of the main properly built facility with the, with containers. But from, what I understand, there are also, people that are actually not inside the facilities, they're outside, just kind of in the wild.
The last time I actually walked in there, I went in there for an appointment in the administration building, and there were people living under makeshift shelters between the container and the fence between the containers. You couldn't walk between the containers, and there was so much rubbish that people couldn't move between the containers, or there were already people living between the containers. So the best imagination of somebody who hasn't had to live that, you still can't grasp the suffering that this causes in daily life. I mean, you're dealing with people who have fled either conflict or persecution. They're already traumatised. They have had, a lot of them have had a very hard time coming through Turkey. People can't imagine what the boat trip from the Turkish coast to the Greek coast is like. The terror, the fear, then to arrive, and then additional suffering within the camp, and basically ongoing trauma. If you weren't traumatised before you went to the camp, 3 or 4, 5 months in the camp, you'll be traumatised because it's a dangerous place, and that's not a judgement on the people in it. You will never have 5,000 people living in those conditions without creating tensions. They don't understand. There are many communities. There's over 21 nationalities, so they don't speak each other's languages. So if there's a problem, they can't actually communicate with each other. And when they can't communicate under such conditions, they get angry, and of course there's tension and there's violence.
Yeah, I think we can even imagine, like, on our daily life, if even we're in the tube or on a bus getting a bit too crowded, even then, like, I tend to get more agitated already, and that's in a really safe, environment already.
But you can't go to the bathroom. You can't get water when you want it. You have to queue to get information. You have to queue to go to the doctor. You have to queue for everything. And look, I'm not blaming anyone. I think it's too easy to blame things. The point is, nobody could have foreseen the amount of people that were going to arrive, but something needs to be or should have been done to accommodate people better. The services that are offered, and there are many services offered, it's just that they cannot cater to the number of people. And they cater to some parts of the population. But for example, there is inside the camp, there is an IOM project for the care of minors. But there are minors living in the jungle. There are young people living in the jungle who are still under the age of 18 and are not inside the camp. It's, as I said, the blame game is easy. The solutions are hard. It's complicated. The solutions are too hard.
Yeah, and I think that's what I really appreciate, all of the partners of Donate for Refugees and all the organizations, like including A.S.I.S.T. Like we are trying to provide some solutions, in the midst of this. And turning to something that looking at what we can help. And you mentioned a little bit about what services are provided. And could you, just explain a little bit, it can be from all areas, like from distribution or services, medical, or any gaps, that's not being provided for, like that you've seen or witnessed or widely known, that's not provided by the state.
Well, by the state and by the international organisation, there are programs running that are aimed at covering all the services. But as I said, they're overwhelmed, they're under-resourced, and they cannot cater to that number of people. So during the COVID period, I think it was particularly dangerous because there was no distributions from the NGOs, and to my knowledge from our volunteers who live in the camp, there were no distributions from management as well. There were minimal services for obvious reasons, but there was no provision of services. So there are many good programs happening, but there are many programs that we really need as well. There's an SMH is working inside the camp with the Ministry of Health, providing a clinic. One of the things that I think is really critical, because I think looking into the future, there's going to be a real social problem with the number of young people who are missing out on education altogether. And when I say education, non-formal education as provided by AFE is really important, because children need to be socialised. They need to know what a learning environment is like. They need a structure and they need to learn. So that's very important. A.S.I.S.T has just opened a project which has enormous potential because it's distribution by choice. In other words, people can go to the distribution warehouse and they can serve themselves. They can choose their own clothing and choose their own shoes, which is a great improvement than just handing out things. So there's a lot of things going on, but there is still, we can't cater to 5,000 people either. I mean, we should also recognise our limitations. We do what all the NGOs here are doing what they can to the best of their ability, and I wouldn't negate what the international organisations and the government is trying to do either. As I said, the blame game is easy, it's the solutions we need. And perhaps we also need people outside of Greece to take a bit of responsibility. They speak of the European Union. Well, where's the Union? They do give a lot of money, they do send a lot of people resources, but this has been going on for 4 years. There has been time to plan. There must be a way of managing this better, or at least sharing the burden, my opinion, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you'll be supported by many people in that particular opinion.
And to blow our own trumpet, it's very difficult to convey to people how important legal assistance is. The laws have changed recently. From January they changed, in May they changed. Information services are very limited. You need to be able to communicate in at least 7 or 8 languages to actually cover most of the people. You won't cover them all because there are certain people who do not speak the languages that we, for instance, we can provide at the moment. But the point being, they need to understand what their rights are in order to exercise them. They need to understand their obligations in order to fulfill them. And if these are changing, which recent laws have changed, how does the information get to them? How do they get to understand it? It's very difficult. And many people have been waiting in the camps up 16, 18 months. And they don't know when they're going to be interviewed. They don't know when they're going to have their medical registration. They don't know what the next step is. And they need to know in order to give them some, well, understanding, but some hope and some autonomy, some ability to make their own decisions and understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. To me, that's an absolute basic minimum. So information services and the provision of lawyers, to me, is critical. Not more important than other things. People need to be safe. They need to have proper hygiene. They need to have shelter. They need to have a social interaction that is healthy. There's a lot of things people need. So I'm not saying that it's more important, but in the end, when people don't know their rights, it can be the difference between getting protection and meeting the criteria for a refugee, or because you don't know how to present it, or because you don't know what the definitions are, you actually don't get protection when you should. And again, you're thrust back into flight, suffering, arrest, deportation. So, and I'm not even saying everybody should get international protection. I know many people leave their homes. They are fleeing. They are fleeing for fear of their lives or fear of persecution. But the criteria for being a refugee, they don't understand it in depth and they don't all meet it. So they don't flee thinking, oh, I'm a refugee and I meet this criteria, this criteria, and this criteria. They're fleeing because they're afraid. And when they get here, they face terrible trauma. But they do have to meet the criteria. That's the law. And I believe in the rule of law. But there are also ways of having people well informed so that they know if they don't meet the criteria for refugee, there are mechanisms whereby they can return home without being arrested, without being beaten up, without spending time in prison. They can go home. But they need to know these things. Otherwise, they appeal a decision, which legally speaking is the correct decision, but they spend another year in the camp doing another appeal. And the suffering in the camp is just, they need to get back to a life, whether it's moving forward through a positive decision or having some options from a negative decision. So I rest my case.
Yeah, no, I find this is the time when I really also feel that information has real power. And as you said, in addition, like together with all the other support services, empowering, people to understand the rights and the procedures and to give them the support in the languages that they can understand. I think that is really valuable, and it can help them to perhaps feel they have more choice or dignity, I would imagine.
Well, I think everybody wants to understand, needs to understand what's happening around them, particularly if they're a threat. So if you give them the information, we have people coming here who are very traumatised, and some of them come back for information sessions because they're in such a state that they cannot absorb the information. So they come back again to hear it again. And I think the advantage of our information sessions is that they can ask questions. They can, we try to keep them away from their personal cases when we're in a group information session. But they can ask questions. If we don't actually have the answer, we will find it for them. And if it's too related to their own personal case, we will refer them to a lawyer who can then, they can have a private session to discuss it. But it's the personal interaction that I think is really important. And that's why our office is in town. That's why we have as nice a possible office as we can. Not expensive, just nice. And we, thanks to the People Kitchen in the past, we've been serving them lunch because our sessions go over the lunch that is served in the camp. And I just think it's a time away from the camp where there's tension, and they're in town, they can go around the shops afterwards or before. And it's like a normalising experience. We try and make our services professional in the sense that this is the way you would be welcomed or greeted in any part of the world if you're going to see your lawyer, or you were going to go to a training session or information session. So that's the idea behind it anyway.
Yeah. Right, let me just gonna say hello to the viewers. So if they're still, hi Pete, hi Najbullah and Laura. Laura had a comment. What a fantastic and valuable service. We take for granted knowing our rights and where and who to go for help, having grown up in unfortunate circumstances in a European country. Information is a powerful tool, and provide to vulnerable people is an amazing service. Thank you for caring. Yeah, so that's really lovely feedback from Laura. And Libby is also saying hello. Hi, Libby. So Libby commented, living without hope is not living.
That's true.
I
would just like to thank Laura, but I would like also to make a point that the Asylum Seekers Information Services team, the key word, or one of the key words, is team. None of this can happen without a team of people. We need the lawyers, volunteer and Greek lawyers. We need the interpreters. The lawyers can't talk to our clients unless they have good interpreters. We need the administration people to set up the services, to do the accounts, to make sure the appointments are scheduled, to register people, to run our information bulletins. We have a WhatsApp. We have 8 WhatsApp bulletin groups, by which we send out news bulletins and government announcements. All of that takes coordination, and we have the most amazing team of volunteers at the moment. 3 of them are asylum seekers themselves. We have 2 foreign lawyers who are doing interpreting and legal questions. And since the beginning of July, we have the services of 2 Greek lawyers, which at the moment is absolutely critical, because during the COVID period, while the asylum services weren't operating, doing registrations, medical registrations, interviews, they were busily working on a backlog of applications, which means that over the last 5 or 6 weeks, decisions are coming out every week, a lot of decisions. Some negative, some positive, many negative. When you have a negative decision and you want to appeal, you need a Greek lawyer. Without a Greek lawyer, you can't appeal. The decision is written in Greek. If you get your decision, you need to have it translated into your language. You need to understand what it says if you are going to contribute to the process of your appeal. So we are very lucky at the moment. We have 2 very good and very experienced Greek lawyers working with us on appeals. And we have 2 very experienced EU lawyers, one from the Netherlands, one from France, one based in Athens, who are doing interview preparation and answering legal questions. The presence of Greek lawyers does not obviate the need for our volunteer lawyers, because the Greek lawyers' services are best used in doing what Greek lawyers can do with appeals, with contacts within the system, within making sure that our volunteer lawyers understand in detail the Greek law, because Greek law yes, it reflects the EU law, but it's written in Greek, and in the law there are always fine points that need to be understood. So the combination of foreign and Greek lawyers is critical to providing a quality service, in my unhumble opinion.
Mm. And to give a bit of context, does the asylum service provide, a number of legal representation as well, and kind of, just give us a picture, like the numbers in terms of how many lawyers, per asylum seeker in the island?
Well, at the moment, and I'm not sure that my figures are correct, but Equal Rights Beyond Borders, which is another NGO which provides very good services, they have, my understanding is that they also have 2 Greek lawyers. The Greek Refugee Council, I'm not sure how many lawyers they have on Chios, but I think they also have 2, if not 3 lawyers. The government has 1 lawyer and contracts another organisation out which has 3 lawyers. So if you add them all up, I think you're including ours, not including our volunteer lawyers, not including the volunteer lawyers from Equal Rights Abroad, Equal Rights Beyond Borders. I think there are possibly 9 people doing appeals. Now, if you understand an appeal, the lawyer has to read the transcript of the interview, the decision. He needs to speak to the client, to talk to the client about the reasoning behind the decision. Then they have to write an appeal. At the moment, because the Turkish border is closed, people are not being arrested when they get their negative decision, but it is possible that they can be arrested and deported. So the timelines for the appeal are very short, and if you have appeals coming out, like 150 or 48 or 70 appeals coming out every week, there is no way there are enough lawyers to do the appeals. And we have clients coming to us who have said that they've been told in Vial that there's no lawyers left, you have to find a private lawyer. Well, I'm sorry, that is actually against the law, because the law provides for free legal aid if you get a negative decision after your interview. But there aren't lawyers available. So that's why it was so critical for us to have Greek lawyers. We had them already, but now we have them on a retainer service contract, which makes it much more affordable. And that is thanks to a grant that we got from Solidarity UK. So it is, it's not for us, it's for the asylum seekers. It's really important to them. And everyone has the right to representation. Maybe the decision is just, maybe they don't meet the criteria, but everyone has the right to understand why they were declined, what the decision says, and to be represented to counter those arguments.
So it's actually a legal right that they have been stripped away from, really, the access to this free legal aid support.
Well, it's like all the services. It's like all the services, they're overwhelmed, under-resourced, and perforce, all their legal rights are being, all their human rights are not being observed because there are not sufficient resources. There are not sufficient lawyers, there's not sufficient accommodation, there's not sufficient education services, there's not sufficient health services. This is why I would never say that our work is more important than other people's. They all have to come together to support the services that are in place but are not sufficient. This is my professional glass of water.
You mentioned a little bit about the COVID, and and with the pandemic this year, and I imagine it's been even more difficult, for asylum seekers and refugees in Greece. Can you perhaps, talk us through a little bit about the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown? What has that meant for the people living there and in general?
Well, to me, it just makes logical sense that if you're going to restrict people's movement, 5,000 people's movement to one area, and you have the risk of a virus, then there is even greater need for better hygiene services, all the services, all this personal protection that everybody needs. And what is more, I'm not against restricting people to an area, because I do believe that people living under those conditions, because many of them are traumatised, many of them have serious and underlying health issues, many of them have health issues. Therefore, their immune system is already compromised. So if the virus were to get into the camp, I think it would be disastrous. Therefore, we are more of a danger to them. We who circulate in the community, which is more mobile, where there is more interaction, we are more of a danger to them than they are to us. So the point being that social distancing in the camp is not possible, completely impossible. How are you going to ask people to be 2 metres apart when you have 5,000 people, or even if you have 200 people queuing for food or for water or for the shower or information, whatever they're queuing for? There's no way they can observe 1.5 metres, 2 metres. There is, however, a way to hand out masks, but that hasn't happened. I know that some people have donated masks, but at least the people who volunteer with us, who live in the camp, they tell us that only people who went to medical registration were receiving masks, and they received disposable masks, and disposable masks have to be disposed of. So, but the other difficulty is that they can't leave the camp, they can't go into town. There are no taxis anymore. They have to walk to town. It's a 6.8 kilometre walk to town. That is a 2.5 hour walk for a healthy adult. So imagine if you're not well, and you're an older person, or you have toddlers with you, you can't come to town. So the limitations on them are even worse than under normal circumstances. In Chios, there have not been any cases of COVID, to my knowledge, in the camp. There have been 3 confirmed cases, to my knowledge, on the island, and so far it has been very well contained. But with the lifting of restrictions, I think everybody has to be on alert, because we have to protect each other, therefore we have to protect everybody. So that's my case again.
Have you had to adapt, how A.S.I.S.T provides the services during the lockdown?
Yes, of course we did. Unfortunately, we don't deliver information sessions, because that was done. Clients came by bus, and we had sessions of 12 persons per day in our training room. As of the 13th of March, we had to cease those, and we did not cease the interview preparation and answering legal questions, because our magnificent lawyer volunteers and interpreters managed to continue these services by WhatsApp video. So it was the same system. You make an appointment, you're on the calendar, the lawyer's available, the interpreter's available. Simply, you don't walk into an office and sit down. You see the interpreter. You're in Vial, you see the interpreter in our office or in town, and you see the lawyer in Salzburg or in Brussels or in Rotterdam or in Paris, and it goes ahead as normal. We had a few technical hiccups. We found that the internet in the camp sometimes wasn't strong enough, so it may have taken a bit longer, but we continued to do those things in any case. We also continued to send out news bulletins on our WhatsApp groups, and we continued to answer the office phone to answer questions. There are some questions that people ask that the interpreters can answer, because they're very well versed, but they never answer legal questions. They will answer practical questions. And at the moment we're doing it in 8 languages. So we have Somali, Arabic, Farsi, French, English, Lingala, Tigrinya, and Amharic. And so far, it's, the donors often ask us to describe the impact of our services. Well, I'm afraid to really understand that, you're going to have to ask the asylum seekers who come here, because we don't know how much of the information they consume. We ask them to fill in client feedback forms, but we have to be honest, the client feedback forms, we get top marks every time because they're grateful for the service. And we do get some good feedback, and from some of the comments we've adjusted and added to the content of our information sessions. But essentially a client feedback form does not serve the true purpose that it's intended for. As to the results of the interviews, well, it should not be and is not the services of a lawyer that will get you asylum. It is the case itself. Hopefully the lawyer has been able to build your confidence, make you feel more comfortable going through what is a very threatening process. But they don't build your case for you, and they don't teach you. They just guide you, jog your memory, and give you confidence, because they probably ask many, many more questions than what happens at the real interview. But having been through it once, I think, in my imagination anyway, having been through it once, I think it's easier to face when you go through the real thing. So we can't judge the impact or the outcome.
Yeah, at least not based on the asylum results, which has so many other factors influencing it.
We can't say, oh, he got asylum. Not because of us. He got asylum because he had genuinely at risk when he's in threat of serious harm if he goes back to his country. So.
Yeah, but I think you're being too humble with the feedback. Despite the gratitude, I'm sure they would reflect how they felt about the services that's been provided to them. That's
hopefully, because I think to give, if they have increased understanding, and it gives them hope, and they are able to face something which is really threatening more easily, and they do it with the knowledge of what can happen and what may happen. I think if I was in that position, I would want to know, what's the next step? How long is it going to take? Okay, there are many questions we can't answer. One of them is, how long is it going to take? We can't answer that question because we're not in charge of scheduling. Some people wait a year, some people wait 2 months. There is no knowing how it is scheduled inside the camp. People ask us, can you get my interview earlier? No, we can't. Actually, at the moment, the government has introduced new electronic forms. So if you do know that your interview is in November, December, they can come to our office, or they can do it themselves if they can find them. Complete a form requesting the Asylum Service to bring forward their interview for such and such a reason. They can send that off to the Asylum Services, and these electronic forms seem to be working quite well because they get their answer, negative or positive, quite quickly. But there are many people that we can't do these forms for as well, because the date of their interview was during COVID. So we don't know when their interview is, therefore it can't be brought forward. But there are many people who had interviews, for example, in July and June, when the restrictions were already lifted, but their interviews didn't take place on those days, and their interview is still written up as being that time, and they don't know when their interview is going to be. I think not knowing these things, the waiting and the conditions they're waiting in, it's just really traumatising. It's very difficult. It's hardship. It's true hardship.
Yeah, I think that not knowing. I just want to echo what Bella has been giving some comments. She said, the impact is that the service supports the access to representation. So that is the impact, just providing that availability and access for representation.
Well, our lawyers will represent somebody who they feel, when they prepare them for interview, for several different reasons, are not able to well represent themselves at interview. But our volunteer lawyers can only do that if the interview is going to be delivered in English, and our Greek lawyers can do it in any case, because they speak good English and they are Greek and they have access to the camp quite easily. But because of the pressure on the workload of the lawyers, it is really only people who cannot speak for themselves or who really need support during an interview who will actually get legal representation. In the appeal process, it's a bit different. They will be represented by their lawyers.
Mm. Yeah, I think Bella also commented, you know, by representation, I think she was referring also to just the entitlement to be informed and to have the information translated into relevant languages, and the decisions also to be delivered in a accessible format. So, yeah.
Well, this is where I say to our interpreters, they are the core of our team. We cannot talk to the clients unless we have an interpreter. Okay, I speak French, I can talk to the French-speaking Africans. Many of the lawyers speak French, they can speak to some of them. Some of the lawyers speak Arabic. But without the interpreters, we can't convey this information. And people have a right to hear it in their own language. I don't know if anyone's ever been to a country where no one speaks English and you've got to try and find a hotel or a restaurant. Well, let me tell you, here they may have the restaurant, they may have to be serving food, they may have accommodation, but they cannot, many people cannot converse with the authorities, or with each other. Language is such a big barrier. It's, I'm sorry, but particularly English-speaking people, they often don't really realise the barrier that this is. No offence, English-speaking people.
Right. So anyone who's watching, if you do have any questions, please feel free to post them. And let me see. I'm sure many people have captured your heart over the years, but is there, you know, a particular person, family, or story that's really impacted you? Maybe you would like to share a little bit with us now.
Of course, they have. Many people have, as you put it, captured my heart. But as a wise Bunuba woman once told me, you don't steal other people's stories. I have met amongst the asylum seekers, amongst the refugees, amongst the community in Chios, and amongst the foreign volunteers who come here. I've met a lot of people who've captured my heart. What captures my heart basically is goodness, and there is such, amongst the asylum seekers, there is such, courage, strength, resilience, but there's something more, there's goodness. And the same applies to some of the refugees. The same applies to the people of Chios, because you may not see it in the mass media, but I've seen many acts of kindness, and we hear about the people who want to stir up trouble and the racism and all the rest of it. That exists. I've never lived anywhere where that didn't exist. But there is also goodness, there is also empathy. It's not so long since Greek people were refugees themselves. They suffered migration under the Ottoman, they suffered under the First World War, they suffered under the Second World War. And even I know quite a few Greeks who, at least if they themselves don't remember, their parents or their grandparents were refugees. And this emergency, because it is an emergency and it is a crisis, this has been going on for 4 years. I know people who were at the landings from day one and were at the landings for many months until it became the job of the port police and the Coast Guard only, because the numbers decreased and it became more formalised. So I've met some extraordinary people, really, and they all capture my heart. Of course, there are some that really irritate me beyond belief, but that's me.
Yeah. So kindness is golden, you know, as one of the mottos of Donate for Refugees, really. Mm.
Well, it amazes me, the goodness, and how some of them look after each other and are very concerned. And it isn't limited to within their communities. I've seen different community people helping different community people. Mm-hmm. It is quite normal, actually. We shouldn't really find it extraordinary that people help each other, but sadly we do.
Yeah. So the last question from me, can you talk to us a little bit about what it means to receive the support from the supporters in the UK and all around the world? And what is it that we can all do to help? And perhaps what are some of the most urgent needs to keep A.S.I.S.T to continue its good work?
Money, money, money in a rich man's world. Seriously, Donate for Refugees has saved our bacon several times. They may not quite be aware of that, but they actually have. People in the UK are extremely generous, be it through Donate Refugees or for another donor that when they give us a grant, they ask us not to mention their name and not to use their logo, which is their policy, so we respect it. But they too have saved our bacon. And there are other individual donors in the UK who have helped us out enormously. Sometimes when people give, they don't realise how much they've given. When I say how important it was to give. That we have had generous donors from Choose Humanity Switzerland, Mary Wenker, who was one of the founders of the organisation and who sponsored emergency legal aid, which was the precursor of A.S.I.S.T. They are a constant supporter. And Mary has actually a fundraiser going at the moment. We have supporters in the Netherlands. We have just the collaboration with Action for Education, with A.S.I.S.T, with the Chios People's Kitchen. All those things have been extraordinarily important to the quality of service that we could give to people. So collaboration, cooperation with the authorities, cooperation with other NGOs is really important. But if I'm talking to people who are not on Chios and who want to do something, well, I hate to sound corny, but the first thing is to understand that the suffering of these people, in my mind, throughout Greece, in Serbia, Bosnia, and other parts of Europe, people are really suffering. And if you have refugees living next door, look after them. Say hi, help them with their shopping, whatever you would normally do. But understanding and giving money. Quite seriously, we have been working now for a year, but we stumble from month to month to keep going. And we are really seriously looking to stabilise our funding base in order to keep the services going, to retain the services of our Greek consultants, and to be able to provide comfortable services for our volunteers, and more importantly for the asylum seekers, because the office, the provision of tea and biscuits, and the atmosphere of the place is really important to provide a professional service, a service that everyone should expect. Sorry.
Yeah, and a safe space, really.
A safe space, and it's away from the tensions of the camp, and it's cool, it's inside, it's in the middle of the town. So if you want to go out and wander around the shops or go and sit in the park, you can do so. And then you can get the bus back to Vial. But at the moment, unfortunately, transport is a real issue. But our priority is to retain the services of our Greek lawyers and at the same time maintain the level of services we've been providing over the last year. So without money we can't do it. Without volunteers we can't.
Of course. So. On that note, Bella is also asking, are you looking for volunteers at the moment?
We are looking for volunteers. We are looking... Ideally, we would like to have 4 volunteer lawyers. My concern is COVID. If people come, they have to follow a strict protocol and they have to be responsible for their own choice. But in September, we have a trainee lawyer coming from Thessalonica, which is inside Greece, and he speaks Greek, so that's excellent. But we are looking for EU lawyers to come at least in September at the latest. Hopefully there won't be an outbreak here, and by September we can feel that it's responsible to come. My concern remains that with Greece lifting the restrictions and many people visiting, I think the threat of an outbreak is real. So if volunteers are willing to come, we have strict protocols in place, and they need to take responsibility for that decision. So yes, we are looking for volunteers. We're looking for somebody who can lessen my load, and for lawyers. And at the moment, we're using volunteers, asylum seekers, and because they do such a good job and they want to volunteer, I don't want to replace them. I want them to have the option to work because they want to. And they're volunteers and they do a great job. So we don't really need coordination, but we do need, we have some international interpreters as well. And interpreters is a bit of a revolving door because 5 of our previous interpreters are currently working in international NGOs, or they've moved to another country, which is great. I mean, if they get the experience here and they move on to get a job with one of the fully paid job, that's great. But we need to replace them. And the pool is getting smaller and smaller of people who speak good English. So we are reaching out beyond the asylum seeker service, but the asylum seekers will always have priority over those who volunteer and come here.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you would like to share with us at this point?
I guess just to thank everybody for watching, and I hope that I've been able to convey something about our organisation. And I really would like to say that A.S.I.S.T is a team. It's not just me because I'm sitting in front of the camera. Without the founders, without the board, without the donors, and the backbone of A.S.I.S.T is the lawyers, the volunteers, and the admin people. And I've had the good fortune to have had amazing people. People just seem to slip into the team. There's no one-upmanship. Nobody's more important than anyone else. Everyone does what needs to be done, whether it's cleaning the toilet or interpreting at an interview. And for me, it's been amazing, and just I'm kind of so honoured to have met such good people, because the commitment, the care, and the way they treat each other and how hard they work, that's what a team is. And I'm so glad we called it a team, the Asylum Seekers Information Services team, because that's actually what it's become, and it's great. I mean, they are great. I'm just the president.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Sandy, for talking to us today. I don't see any questions, so this is the last chance if anyone would like to raise any questions. I see there is someone asking for help, and we will try to message you after to see if we can be of support. Yeah, and so thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. I have something else to say. I hate looking at myself on camera. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you from all of us, for all the work that you and your team have been doing, and I know you will continue to do. And thank you everyone who's tuned in and joined us, and all your engagement to keep us, our conversation lively and feeling the support from the viewers. So I think Sandy will put a link of A.S.I.S.T for donations and also for volunteering opportunities in the comments later. And our next Donate for Refugees Live on the ground is on Sunday 26th. It will be at 2 p.m. UK time again. when Vanessa will be interviewing Jacob Wong of Action for Education and Europe Must Act in Samos. So thanks everyone watching. Thanks, Andy. So lovely to speak to you today. And
good to see you, Jo.
Stay safe, stay well, and have a lovely Sunday, everyone.
Really good to see you, Jo. Take care. Stay well.